thank you for having me at WBA. I'm kind of a adjunct techie, but I'm a planner by trade. I'm not an engineer. So I kind of float in the areas between being a problem solver and an opportunity maker. And so I want to kind of highlight that in my discussion today. Oh, that's what I need. I think I do need that, yes. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Capital Corridor, but largely talk about the transport industry as a whole. So just a little background about what we are. We serve this market in California, Northern California. We bring a lot of folks into the Bay Area that live further afield, like in Sacramento, but we also serve down in Silicon Valley. So we've kind of got these different markets, and a little more about Northern California, lots of universities, Silicon Valley, tourism, airports, entertainment stadiums, and Sacramento is this big home of state government. So 160 miles, those different markets we talked about, and we're the only transportation service serving the mega region, and people are really living 2 hours away, me included. I work in Oakland when I go into the office, and I live in Sacramento. So I want my time on the train to be valuable. And we operate that as Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority. We brand, our operator is Amtrak. So a lot of you will, if you're in the States, you certainly know about Amtrak. So what I'm going to cover today are three different things. One is about the market as a whole, about how bandwidth and Wi-Fi relate to different transportation modes. Then I'm going to go into how we deal with it, with Wi-Fi on our trains, and how we've been dealing with it. And then the transport market as a whole, about their suitability as a player in the Wi-Fi market or in the cellular market. So I'll get started here. So this is the general prescription for transit across the world, really. For heavy rail, which is what I'm in the area of, we got lots of options. We have trackside, very expensive, but really good if you can do it. Cellular aggregation, that's my world. And then satellites coming along. Satellite was often looked at, but boy, the business models and the cost of it just was prohibitive. But it's getting better through the LEO stuff. Subway, we heard about that in the very first keynote. Down deep, no cellular, except it's trackside, and you can bring cellular, you could bring Wi-Fi to it. Light rail, streetcar, kind of open in the city, cellular, trackside, it depends on the uses there. And then buses are cellular, and there's a smidgen of them kind of looking at satellite for certain use cases. So everything that generally happens today, most services are cellular, and that's aggregated cellular, and then repurposed on the transit vehicle as Wi-Fi. So now this is a little bit towards my perspective. So cellular backhaul, the metaphor is we were given lemons to work with. We take the lemons and we squeeze the hell out of them. At least we try as best we can. It's not enough to just do that. We've got to use techniques to get as much bandwidth as we can, because as soon as you're on a transit vehicle and people are connected, they are competing. And so a lot of the interest that when I come to conferences like this and I hear, oh, this is a better way to segregate traffic and prioritize traffic, to what extent is, of course, where the decision is. So a little bit of our history was that in 2003, we were approached by a company called Point Shot Wireless and said, we want to do a trial in your area. And they came with a satellite dome that was about half the size of a VW Bug. And I thought, that's not going to fit through the tunnels, but it kind of did. And then it was like, well, that's not going to work. And it was 2G kind of at the time. But we evolved over time, learning the business models, moved to a free business model where we attract people to our mode and we get extra ticket revenue. So that is the predominant model around the world, especially in trains where passenger Wi-Fi is involved. And again, primarily cellular backhaul. So I'm envious of places like Sweden that have great bandwidth. Here in the US, not quite as good, but we understand why, because it's a big place to cover. Different governmental incentives too for providing a lot of bandwidth. So what we've innovated on lately is building upon lessons of the initial trial with Amtrak. We now control our system internally ourselves, but we work with other rail partners in Northern California or throughout California for some of the features here. So we have a service-based model approach. And if government procurement is anything you're familiar with, when we procure something, man, we hold on to it for 20 years and it just dies on the vine over time. So I wanted to do a different model where we can refresh with the vendor and we get new access points and so forth. So our real key was to benefit from a procurement that supported that objective. So the way we have this today, Nomad Digital is our lead service provider or integrator. And then they provide Go Media, which is the landing page, but also the entertainment venue where we have movies on the train to try to distract you so you don't use the bandwidth. So, I mean, that's one technique there. So then Razor Secure is our system security thing, and they just kind of watch for odd behavior. A real key point for us is a company called Zentrans, and they almost work for us. I mean, they are almost staff as far as we're concerned. They are our subject matter experts, and they have different tools and relationships with Nomad Digital. So that's kind of this triangle of innovation and wants, and they act as my sort of, I need this to happen. Can you analyze this? And so they play that role. So as I said, we have several entities who kind of use that sort of triangle of relationships. So the way we provide bandwidth is through aggregated cellular. We have 2 T-Mobile SIMs in each of the brain cars that are on a train set, 3 AT&Ts, and then 1 Verizon SIM. And you can see why we only have 1 Verizon, because it's unlimited up until 25 gigs. So, okay. So we're going to manage how that happens. We did release some of the throttling settings we put on the Wi-Fi network back in 2021. And what a great time to be, except for COVID, but you're on a train, nobody's on the train. Man, you get to use all the bandwidth you want. It was great, but you had to sit far away apart. And our ridership plummeted, of course, during that time. You've heard about what's happened with transit, but gradually they're coming back. So I wanted to talk about kind of the architecture we have in terms of the business model relationship. So we get our funding from the state. That flows through us to Nomad Digital. On the side, we fund Zentrans and that little microscope heartbeat thing. They're monitoring the system. So is Nomad monitoring the system. We're trying to always solve the problems that come up, and they do come up from time to time. We fund T-Mobile, SIM cards, AT&T, Verizon. That's the pipes that we use, and then the internet to the yellow box is projected to the train customers. And then Nomad has the relationships with the different vendors for what they do. Go Media does the portal and the landing page, Razor Secure cybersecurity. So this is the core of it, and this happens every year. We ask for money from the state to fund this amenity, really. But there's more than we do than just an amenity for public Wi-Fi. So that whole model there is for the Wi-Fi system, but data from the system, from GPS, is used in our passenger information display. So that's the PID system, and that's what drives the real-time information about where a vehicle is located, how long it's going to get there, and then we apply business rules to that side. So not too connected to the Wi-Fi network, just one piece of information, but a real key, a real innovative area, I think, for us is this EMV box, which is the Euro MasterCard Visa. This is contactless payments, and we're the first ones in the US to be doing contactless payments, and that rides on the Wi-Fi network. And it uses all the comms from that, and then the tap-in goes through Kuba, which is the hardware vendor, off to the transit payment processor, off to the bank relationship, and then we get paid. So we're just limiting that to a few, couple of hundred customers right now, because we're testing it out and we're learning a ton on this, including how robust the on-train network needs to be and how robust the monitoring needs to be. So we took the passenger Wi-Fi and have cranked up the need to have that thing stable and working, because now it's revenue that we're talking about. And we're slated to launch for EMV later in the year. A little bit of what we do here, this is what Zentrans produced, is a monitoring tool. And this is available just on the web here, that we have a module in our screen, really, in our office. And I walk by that screen a lot, and I look at that cellular use and performance. And when I see one of the networks suddenly taking a dip, I'm like, uh-oh, what's going on here? Did somebody change the latency settings so that the favoritism of the network changed through that? So I check that out from time to time, but this just kind of keeps us on track with what we're doing. Just quickly, a little bit about our usage, and I find some of this interesting. The ridership is growing because it's coming back from COVID, but the amount of use on the train per passenger that does connect has been about the same. It just kind of holds steady it hasn't changed very much. But what we're seeing now, there's a little bit of variability here, but for those who are connected, their throughput per user is slightly trending downward. And I wonder, what is that? And I don't have all the details to look at this quite yet, but I'm suspecting we're starting to see a little bit of that competition on the train between users. And so it kind of all throttles down. So now I'm going to step back away from what we are as an intercity rail operator, and I'm going to talk more about public transport overall. So the fact is that there's a wide variety of public transport systems in the US, around the world, and not all of it, I don't think, is commercially interesting either which way in terms of Wi-Fi. So you kind of have to go through all these filters to find out, aha, I've got the right mix. The things that help with that are a long travel time, and that's us. Long travel time. I want to be entertained. I want to work. The ownership of land assets. So if you're a transport company, as we heard in the first Boingo presentation yesterday, New York MTA, they own their assets. Good on them. Leverage them. Use those to obtain some revenue, have happy riders, that kind of stuff. The other bit is the rolling stock itself. If you're standing in a crowded bus for 15 minutes, are you really going to be doing much productivity? You might be able to reach your phone, but in our case, rolling stock and a nice seat and time, it all matters in terms of how the rolling stock can accommodate these things, or should accommodate. And then there's other reasons to have Wi-Fi, such as perhaps live video streaming for safety, but that is a really big hurdle because of the bandwidth needs and that mobile unit. So just like spectrum we talked about, there is really a spectrum of different transits. And some of these graphs here are meant to show that, by God, New York just absolutely dominates in the US. There's nothing like it. 38% of transport trips in the large metro areas. And then finally, all these other cities are so much less. Chicago and Illinois, you go down to it, and then all other metros are not even what New York has. So the attractiveness from the commercial aspect is New York is a great place to crack, to get into, but that circle pie diagram there, the real majority of transit systems in the US are rural. And some of those are operated by staff of 3 people. The boss is driving a bus, okay? And they don't know about this world, this Wi-Fi world. So in transport, the form follows the flows. So mobility demand for transport across a market or between markets, it will kind of determine what kind of vehicle you get, what kind of level of service you get. So for Wi-Fi and transit, it follows the mobility flow. So if you have a busy place like New York, you're going to have a lot of service. You'll have trains. You'll have a lot of train service. And that also affects the vehicles. So in our case, spacious us, seats, tables, it makes sense. You have room to be productive, but in a bus, not the same. The other thing about the transit agency is, what assets do they own? In our case, we do not even own the tracks we are operating on. They're owned by a freight railroad. We don't own the stations. So we're limited in what we can offer, the suite of services we can offer, at least easily. But my parent agency, Bay Area Rapid Transit, or BART, does own their assets, and they are leveraging those assets. And they also have passengers, which I consider assets as well. So they leverage all of that in partnerships with industry leaders such as yourselves. So now to the kind of the DNA of transit agencies. Again, super diverse. Natively, there's very few transport employees that really even know about what's going on in this world that we've been talking about. They're not exposed to these objectives typically. So they don't always have a great understanding about the business model that they could be thinking about or that you're thinking about. They don't know about the ways to procure in technology areas, and they're certainly not keeping up with industry trends. But there are transit IT folks, but they're there to serve the office. They're there a little bit to possibly serve the transit vehicles or the operations themselves. And they're going to be mostly concerned about network security. And they're not trying to do public-facing Wi-Fi. But on the other end of the tail, where it's really steep, where you've got your New Yorks and your big metros, they do have staff who understand radio frequencies, IT, they're Wi-Fi savvy, I'd say. BART is a good example. They work with Bolden Networks and American Tower because they're trying to leverage their assets, and they understand what they have and what they're trying to create out of that, both for a revenue share, but also for their riders and for their own system itself. It's a great deal to go with a place like BART because you own footprints in the entire Bay Area to place your towers and other things like that in fiber. So the thing is, though, in the transport industry, the managers of the transport systems aren't going to have a lot of knowledge about IT systems or Wi-Fi. They're going to mostly know what they see advertised maybe with Best Buy, and they're going to wonder, well, why should I do that? Why should I care about Wi-Fi 7 and what it can do? So there's a whole layer of education there, I think that's important. And if you're a smaller transit agency, and there's some pictures here running on a rural road. This is on-demand transit. Pick up somebody who needs to go to a medical appointment or something like that. They will barely have an IT department, and they won't even be thinking about it, especially in the rural areas. So, but that's slowly changing. The reason it's changing is because the federal government is looking to automate data that's coming from that vehicle. In other words, ridership counts, reporting requirements, and that all gets a lot easier when it's automated or there's Wi-Fi sensing devices, Bluetooth sensing devices. And we are even looking at places in California. I work a little bit with the state on this contactless payment ticketing. And they're wondering, well, how are we going to get a transit agency in Colusa County with population of 18, no, a little more than that, but really not a lot of folks. How are they going to exchange your data? How are they going to see the real-time station? So Starlink is looking as an option, and they've done some trials there. The issue is the business model. How much does Starlink cost? So the nature of the transport journey is also a point, especially in my situation. This is how I came to this whole conference, actually, because passengers are on our trains a long time. External parties saw, hey, I like those passengers. They would be the ones that use Wi-Fi, and they sure do. So kind of got sucked into this world back in 2003 and been working on it ever since. It's a compelling reason to have folks get on our service as opposed to driving. And even if we didn't have Wi-Fi, they seem to like just the fact that I don't have to be white-knuckled driving behind stop-and-go traffic. But you add the Wi-Fi and you're like, all right, that's it. So that is a sticky point. We get more revenue because of that. So wanted to go over what I covered today. It's the different niches. It's the intercity passenger rail case that we have, and then the suitability of Wi-Fi and the transport agency as a match. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions, but if you have other questions, it'd be great to see in a group context.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much, Jim.